You probably think of a straw hat and tractor when you think of farming, but this guy's changing everything about how it works. Joel Salatin joins us in studio today. I'm James Poulos. This is Zero Hour. He's a self-described Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. And he's here in studio today. Welcome, Joel.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to unpack that. But
Sure.
I just want to start, lay the groundwork here. You are a multi-generational farmer, which I think is really important to kind of understanding where you're coming from, what your diagnosis is of kind of what moment we're in, what the stakes are. You were raised on the farm, you grew up on the farm,
right.
You took over the farm, you've been running the farm for quite some time now.
Yes.
And you've seen crazy change unfold, not just sort of in the immediate vicinity in Virginia, but of course, throughout the country. Some might say that things have been building to a crisis point for some time, and finally, we have an election where a popular figure rides into power. I'm talking about RFK here. He's not the president, but this is a guy with a lineage who stands up and says, number one issue is make America healthy again, and if we don't do it now, it's not going to get done. Catastrophic consequences. That seems to track with the way that more and more Americans are feeling, what they're experiencing in their everyday lives. Concerns about, you sort of look around and do sort of man on the street, sort of check on the people you see walking around, and you don't always like what you see, Things seem to be headed toward that kind of crisis point. I'm interested in kind of starting out with, what is your lifelong experience to date taught you and shown you about kind of what the problem is, how bad it is, and how farming might lead us out of the woods here?
Yeah, so our family came to the farm where we are in Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, in 1961, and it was a great indicator of everything that was wrong in agriculture, even up until then. Yeah. We had our deepest gully was 16 feet deep. A gully is something where the topsoil has eroded, and you have this deep V in the countryside.
So that's bad.
That's bad.
Yes.
That's bad. And some, depending on where you go, 3 to 8 feet of topsoil had washed off of our land in the 200 years of European occupation, post indigenous use, which was primarily it was a prairie. Wild game, bison, elk, of course, a lot of passenger pigeons, pheasants, different things. But it was a perennially based system, perennial as opposed to annual, which you have to plant all the time. And when the Europeans came, of course, the grain was the holy grail. How can we grow grain? And I've often thought, if Thomas Jefferson were alive, would he have had a Tyson chicken house? And the answer is yes, because his 4 goals were identical to industrial farming today. Number 1, grain is the holy grail. Number 2, fertility comes from somewhere else. You couldn't actually grow soil or keep soil fertile in situ. You had to import or you had to go west, young man, go west.
Right.
You had to find new ground, and then of course another aspect was cheap labor, and then another one was exports. Cheap labor, of course, being slavery at that time.
Sure.
And then exports, the answer to economics is exports. And my paradigm, our family's paradigm, is completely opposite all that. We want to pay our labor. We like white-collar salaried farmers. We think that's a good thing. Let's get our best and brightest on the land, not our, D and F students. We believe that supplying our domestic markets is the key to health. Right now, 1 in 5 mouthfuls of food that Americans take are imported from foreign countries, and so we need to feed ourselves first. We believe in fertility comes from in situ. Nature doesn't move carbon very far. I mean, leaves blow and birds eat something and then go up and poop somewhere, but it doesn't move carbon real far. The idea that American farmers are locked into Moroccan phosphate and Vladimir Putin's anhydrous ammonia, that's not a natural system. And so in all of these respects, and as far as grain is not the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is perennials and livestock. All diets of antiquity were founded in herbivores and seafood. Herbivores being, cows,
sure,
camels, sheep, goats, and seafood. Why? Well, because those were the nutrient-dense things that could be grown without tillage. So until very modern times with cheap energy and mechanization, tillage was laborious. It was hard. If you had to walk with a sharp stick behind a ox all day, you couldn't turn very much soil to plant corn or amaranth or wheat, and so grain was always very, very expensive. Bread was a treat. It was a treat, and so when our family came to the farm, we had this gullied rock pile. We said, well, how do we heal this? How do we do this? And we started looking at these natural patterns of animal movement, perennials, on-site carbon, biomass, vegetation on-site, building soil on-site, and selling to your neighbors, selling to your neighborhood. Those were linchpins of our, of kind of our paradigm, our going forward. And Dad was an accountant, Mom was a school teacher. The off-farm jobs paid the mortgage initially, 10 years to do that. But Dad was very much a visionary and way ahead of his time. We said he was organic before Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. and he, as an accountant, he saw the chemical approach as a rat race. You were trying to stay ahead of nature's adaptation to adapt to the chemicals, whether it's fertilizers, pesticides, whatever. When you dump these unnaturals into nature, the biology of nature tries to adapt, counteract it, so the bugs get stronger. Then you have super bugs, MRSA, C. diff, what we've seen with antibiotics and everything else. All of life is adapting, trying to adapt to new attacks that are coming, mutations, and trying to survive. And so we could talk about that in regard to bird flu right now. Here we are in this big bird flu thing. 166 million chickens killed in the last 24 months, and probably only 1 or 2 million were actually sick. All the rest of them were fine. But we have this eradication idea that if 1 in 100,000 is sick, we kill all.
Sterilize the world.
We sterilize everything. And what we do then is we deny chickens the chance to adapt to the virus. Let's not have a debate about whether or not there are viruses. Let's just let that one lie.
Right.
And so the virus is trying to adapt, to become more virulent, more deadly, if you will. And so the chickens that either don't get it or got it and got over it, and there are many that do, to kill them, we deny chickens the chance for the most, vibrant, virulent, immunological ones to adapt to give us progeny that is now, keeping up with the virus.
Yeah, if your immune system never gets a chance to work, then it's not an immune system.
That's right. It doesn't get a chance to adapt to whatever the new context is. And so that this whole, this extermination policy is it's insanity. It's just insanity, both scientifically and intuitively. I mean, when you have a disease, you don't kill the survivors. You keep the survivors.
Right.
You breed
Let's
those.
kill more than the disease will. Okay,
Sure.
Why not?
And so our family set about, looking at these basic natural patterns, perennials, polycultures, animals move, neighborhood, community marketing, on-site biomass generation. And so we started composting. Dad developed a portable electric fencing system so we could, move the cows around. So we move, instead of having animals confined in a factory house, whether it's cows, pigs, or chickens or turkeys, ours are on pasture, and we move them every day to a new paddock with portable infrastructure. So the things that we've developed on our farm, we didn't sit around in a focus group and say, how can we be clever? Yeah. No, they came as a natural result of looking at the way God made the system and saying, how do we duplicate that on a domestic scale? Nature doesn't put 100,000 cows in one spot. Nature doesn't put a bunch of chickens, close out the sun, close out the grass, and close out the decent air, and coop them up in a house on their own toilet.
Right.
Nature doesn't do that. And
at that point, what are you really eating?
Well,
what does that thing become?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, when fecal particulate is what's in the air, and you're breathing in that, and then that abrades your mucous membranes, your respiratory tract, and then makes big abscesses, sores in your respiratory tract, and then the manure goes directly into your bloodstream. Well, now we got to pump them full of antibiotics and mRNA jabs and whatever to try to keep them healthy. Create crutches. That's how much of that comes to us. What's the deal with that? And we know that nutritionally there's a huge difference. I mean, we participated with 11 other. There were 12 of us that participated in a wonderful egg study 8-9 years ago, and to try to settle the question: is there a difference in how an animal is raised? So we looked at about 10 different things that are on the the USDA label on eggs, nutrition label, and I'll just take one of them: folic acid. Our eggs averaged about 1,038 micrograms per egg, and the official USDA label is 48. I mean, this isn't a 10% difference. This is same thing. Omega-3, omega-6. Same thing with riboflavin in like grass-finished beef. 300% more than grain-finished beef in riboflavin. Those kinds of numbers are all over, and we say you are what you eat. We are what you eat, but you also are what you eat eats.
Yeah, that's right.
It goes farther into it. So the mobility and the things that we've developed were a direct result of trying to mimic the abundance. A lot of people don't realize that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That should give everybody pause. Now, it wasn't all eaten by people. There were a couple 100 million bison. There were 2 million wolves that wanted 20 pounds of meat a day. When Lewis and Clark went on their expedition, they said they couldn't go a mile without encountering a bear. Think about how much food, how many bears that must have been, to feed. There were bird populations that were so dense they blocked out the sun for a day. Passenger pigeons, which are now extinct. Beavers, there were 200 million beavers that ate. Just 200 million beavers ate as much vegetation as all the people in North America today. So, this was an incredibly abundant place. And so for all the, machinations of, John Deere tractors and hybrid seeds and Norman Borlaug and, and everything else that's come along, we still have not achieved the level of production that was here 500 years ago.
Right. And at what cost? At biodiversity tanking, human health tanking, mental health. You know, it's all interrelated.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
if you're consuming things that are not good for you and are not wholesome, it's going to have an effect on what's going on internally, mentally, and all these things. And they're all starting to line up and reach this crisis point.
Yeah.
So
and if that's not bad enough, I mean, if just the reduction in nutritional vitality of our raw food is not enough.
yeah.
Now 75% of the food we eat is ultra processed,
Mm-hmm.
which then further apes it, adulterates it, you know, which means you can't make this stuff in your kitchen and you can't pronounce the ingredients.
Yeah. And so you go out to eat for every meal and who knows what's in there. And then you need supplements and who knows what's in the supplements.
Right. I well remember, I'm a little older than you are, but I well remember a day when you wanted to have when mom wanted to have a birthday party for a 3-year-old and you just invited your friends and you had a birthday party.
Right.
Now you have to spend a week with all the other moms. Well, what's your kid allergic to? We didn't even have a phrase, food allergies. It didn't even exist, or celiac disease, or gluten intolerance, or, you know, any of these things. They weren't even in existence back then. And I didn't know any diabetics. I mean, there were almost no fat people. I mean, yeah, you knew, you know, the one fat lady, the one big fat guy. I mean, you knew, but it wasn't around.
You had to make a real effort to gain weight like that.
Right.
And now you just kind of go through whatever's laid out for you, and like these things start happening.
Right. So the idea that we now just use this phraseology, you know, E. coli, salmonella, Campylobacter, all these things. I mean, in my view, what all of these are is essentially nature on her knees, if you will, begging us, enough, you know, quit raping me, quit violating me, quit abusing me, quit disrespecting me. How hard do I have to
punch back before you get the message?
Yeah. So, you know, we dare to ask at our farm, well, how do we make happy pigs? Mm-hmm. You know, we don't ask that in our culture. Mm-hmm. It's just, we view the pig as an inanimate pile of protoplasmic structure to be manipulated however cleverly hubris can imagine to manipulate it. And we don't ask how to respect and honor the pigness of the pig as a beginning of not only its health, but then, you know, our health. And then I would suggest that a culture that doesn't ask how to respect and honor the pigness of the pig will also not ask how to honor and respect, you know, the Jamesness of James, the Maryness of Mary. You know, that's how you create an ethical, moral framework around.
Well, it's really tough when
culture.
You got people on one end who say, no, the pig is just a blob of cells, just like everything is. You can totally abstract it out of its natural character, make it a platform for growing organs or spare parts, whatever you want. And then on the other side, you have people saying, no. A pig is a person. It's cuter than you. It's smarter than your toddler. We're worse than the pigs. Don't kill the pigs. Don't eat the pigs. And you have this enormous gulf. You know, and in a perverse way, like those two extremes actually seem to be reinforcing each other, pushing people further in those two directions, where you're either thinking of animals as just raw materials or as, you know, something that's too cute to even involve yourself in. And that bleeds into the way that we see one another too.
Well, it sure does. I mean, the both extremes. One views life as fundamentally mechanical, that it's just machines and mechanics, and the other views life in a perverse, almost an animalistic, cultish approach. That, you know, my dog is my aunt, is my cat, is my pig, is my chicken, and that does not indicate a new, you know, cosmic awareness of whatever life and ethics. It's actually a devolution into a disconnection from our ecological umbilical. The fact is, in order to have life, something has to die. One of the best examples of that is a compost pile. I mean, a compost pile is all about something that was living, died, now it's being decomposed, and it's being regenerated. This life, death, decomposition, regeneration, life, death, that is the cycle. If you don't believe that, you know, everything is eating and being eaten. That's how that's how things work, and that's a fundamental ecological principle. If you don't believe that, go lie naked in your flower bed for a week and see what gets eaten.
Right.
And at some point, it's gonna get eaten, and so the people that have the worship, the animal worship element, which I understand is partly a backlash against concentrated animal feeding operations.
Sure.
and the mechanistic view of the others.
But both of those extremes are very anti-human.
They are. They're both very anti-human. They absolutely are.
Okay, so these are the stakes. We got RFK, we got Maha out there. In times of crisis like this, people reach for the top-down solution immediately. Oh my God, we have no time to lose. We can't wait for all these little farmers to do their little things, and we can't wait for nature to heal. We have to come in and fix it with just as much applied force as we messed it up. How do you respond to that sort of that instinct, that feeling, as someone who is doing it from the ground up?
So, as a libertarian, I view pretty skeptically any government intervention in the marketplace. And you're hard pressed actually to find a government program that doesn't have some sort of perverse incentive in it.
Right.
I was just in Iowa, and Iowa gets well over $1 billion a year, just Iowa, just one state, in crop subsidies. And of course, three of them Iowa doesn't grow. Sugar cane, cotton, and rice. Iowa doesn't grow, so it's limited to corn, beans, and wheat. And nobody else gets an incentive. Nobody else gets a crop insurance. Nobody else gets help. And so what it creates is a very monocultured system that is scale prejudicial against small and medium sized.
Yeah.
And so just a handful of farmers get the bulk of that, just like three entities have gotten the bulk of all the bird flu indemnity payments. All of these these government interventionist programs are prejudicial against competition. They are protective of the biggest players that are in already. And it pushes into other industries. You got corn and the gasoline, and where does it stop? That's right. None of that would happen. I mean, it's the same as solar panels. None of that would happen if it weren't for the taxpayer subsidized finger on the scale of whatever the other side of that is.
Right.
And so I think, and I'm not opposed to corn. I'm not opposed to solar panels.
Sure.
Okay, but let them carry their weight. When the time is right for them to happen. I mean, Adam Smith's, the invisible hand of the marketplace. When that works, then it works. And when it doesn't, when the government's putting their finger on the scale to pick the winners and losers, that's where you get this perversity. The reason we have a K Street, where all the lobbyists live, the reason we have a K Street is because all of our markets and freedoms are for sale. Right. If our freedoms weren't for sale and our decisions weren't for sale, we wouldn't have a K Street. And so, my biggest concern, and I love the Maha movement. I appreciate RFK Jr. We have talked. My biggest concern, though, is that we trade concessions for, whatever, Monsanto and DuPont and chemicals, and we trade that for incentives on the other side, so that let's just say the organic community, which has accused the chemical community of bellying up to the trough for 60 years to get concessions. Now suddenly organic community we've got a chance. We'll belly up to the trough and we'll get this. No, neither one of them is correct. Don't anybody belly up to the trough. Let the government just stay out of the discussion and let the individual people make their decisions.
You talked to RFK about this issue?
Yes. Yes, I certainly have, and I think that that my friends that are close to him are well aware. So I do, I do numerous media things, and they're always asking me, well, if you were king for a day, if you were in charge of the USDA, I call it the US duh, what would you do? And they want you to take specific programs. Well, I'd substitute this for that. I'd substitute this for that. I mean, that's a normal approach, right?
Right. Reward your friends.
Right. Exactly.
Patronage.
And I tell you know what? I'm really boring. I'm a one-string banjo. All right. I've only got one thing, and that's a food emancipation proclamation.
Okay. Sounds promising.
Yes. So, and I know these are strong words. The Emancipation Proclamation, and historically was a big deal, but it freed the slaves. Right now, we have an enslaved, shackled food system that is enslaved to a regulatory, a bureaucratic structure that does not allow neighbor-to-neighbor food transactions without a bureaucrat involved. Go out and try to make a chicken pot pie and sell it to your neighbor. It's illegal.
Wow.
All right. And so, or try to, butcher a pig. You can butcher your own pig in the backyard.
Yeah.
But if a neighbor comes over and says, "Oh man, I love the way you raised that pig. Could I buy 2 pounds of sausage, from you for illegal?" Okay. And so what we have right now nationally is a prohibition, a criminalization of unfettered direct personal contact. If you want to come to my farm, smell around, look around, ask around, and as two, I'm using again powerful language, voluntary consenting adults expressing our freedom of choice, we should be able to engage in a food transaction without a license, without a bureaucrat, without paying off somebody. We just engage in a transaction.
Right. Well, we live in health and safety world where we're obsessed with health and safety because our obsessions are actually blowing back in our face and making us less healthy and less safe. But that's the argument is, oh no, you might have Farmer Bill might not measure up to the right standards and might not use the best practices. And then he's going to kill you because you're going to try to taste his delicious looking pig.
That's right.
How do you respond?
On a cottage industry bill that I was involved with in Virginia, for example, you're exactly right. Our Commissioner of Agriculture, the top guy in the state under the governor, cabinet level position, he came up to me during a break in the hearing. And he was a very nice guy. And he said, Joel, we can't let people choose their food. If we did, we couldn't build enough hospitals fast enough.
You're going to kill
for
grandma.
all the people that are going to get bad food. And of course, my first reaction is, well, as if government sanctioned food is all okay.
Right.
I mean, you can give your kid 4 cans of Coca-Cola every day. That's perfectly safe. But 1 teaspoon of raw milk, no, that's deadly. And so the truth is that safety, I'm just going to say a blanket statement. This is heresy, but safety is subjective.
Yeah.
Safety is subjective. There are people every day that engage in my view, very unsafe things. But I mean, I'm not going to go bungee jump. Okay, I can think of other things. I'm not going to go. I think in a lot of ways, sending your child to public school is unsafe.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So safety becomes a very subjective thing, and if the government can determine what is safe and what isn't, that is just an expressway.
Right. If I can sign a waiver for going to an escape room, I should be able to sign a waiver for buying and selling neighbors' food.
Yes, absolutely. We actually tried that. We tried to introduce legislation in Virginia for that very thing, a waiver. Why can't somebody come out and if they want to make a voluntary choice, and the Attorney General said waivers don't mean anything. They don't hold up in court, and you can't waive away your uninformed consent for something you don't know about.
Okay.
So,
Man, they're working hard to shut it down.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. If anybody says, well, then people might get bad food, the first thing you're assuming is that government-approved food is better than food you might find elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. The second thing is you're assuming that bureaucrats are more trustworthy than farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a pretty big stretch too, especially if we've seen the machinations of Anthony Fauci, COVID, and this sort of thing. To think that the bureaucracy is actually purer than the wind-driven snow, and these farmers are a bunch of dolt, idiot, conniving, cheating,
I always go back to the top app games on your phone or whatever are like farm simulators. Kids want to simulate running farms. They're not doing bureaucrat simulators.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. And of course, the other side always comes and says, "Well, we need a fair playing field." I mean, if Tyson has to go through this, licensing and compliance stuff, then everybody should have to go through it. And that's like saying, we're going to level the playing field on football. All right. The only place you can play football is on an NFL-approved, compliant stadium.
Sure.
Sunday afternoon pickup games in the backyard, where the goalpost is the lilac bush and the clothesline on one end and the peach tree and the flower pot on the other. No. That's not going to work. We've got to level the playing field, and we can only play, on an NFL stadium. Well, that's a level playing field, but it's not appropriate for any kind of freedom or liberty to express itself.
Well, and it's crazy when you've got, you got people on the left who say, we're for defending our sacred democracy. And you got people on the right who, no, we're for defending the American people. And it's like somehow neither of these two groups can come together in any way and crack the code on this.
That's right.
Because they actually don't seem to have actual trust in ordinary people to do things that are actually good for them.
Yeah. We have... we love being now called the culture of choice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, choice is everything. We've got choice in the bathroom now, choice in the bedroom, choice in the womb, but we don't have choice in the kitchen. And people say, well, come on, I go to Walmart, I go to Kroger's or Piggly Wiggly or, H-E-B in Texas, well, look at all the shelves, they're full of choice. But that is a very, very narrow choice. All of that pretty labels. I mean, think about the last time you saw a hot dog recall or a recall of eggs or something, or a recall of any food item, sausage, whatever. And in the recall, it'll give you the brand names. And there's like 25 brand names. It all came from the same funnel.
Factories.
There's really no choice.
That's right.
Try getting, Aunt Matilda's quiche. Or try getting, Uncle John's homemade summer sausage. There's very little choice. And
then everything that's not perishable is just the same 10 chemicals and fillers.
Right. So what happens is that, and what has happened since 1906, when we started the Food Safety Inspection Service, I'm starting in 1908, took 2 years after Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle.
Right.
For socialist President Teddy Roosevelt to give in to the demands of the industry. At that time, 7 companies controlled 50% of America's meat supply. 7 companies controlled 50% of the American meat supply, and that was considered oligarchical. And when that book came out, within 6 months, those companies lost half of their market share, and people fled back to their neighborhood butcher, their neighbors, and all this.
They still had neighbors to flee back to.
Exactly. They sure did. Good point. Because there was still a fairly active, remember, that was only 7 companies controlling 50%. Right. So there was still a fairly active, neighborhood, community, canneries, slaughterhouses, things like that. Well, the companies, they went to Roosevelt on their knees, said, hey, you've got to protect us here, or we're going to go out of business. And so he gave them the Food Safety Inspection Service, the federal, inspection agency. Since that time now, we've gone now to where today 4 companies control 85% of the meat trade in America.
Yeah.
And we call that a free market. And so that's what the government involvement has done over this period of time, it has centralized and concentrated because it is always, always, always scale prejudicial.
How much of the resistance politically to neighbor food economies is coming from those big four?
A lot, because they know. See, to the liberal mindset, we've talked about the liberal and the conservative here already. Mm-hmm. To the liberal mindset, the answer to this oligarchy, and it is an oligarchy, the answer is we've got to send the Federal Trade Commission in there, do antitrust suits.
Right.
We've got to break up these big companies.
We got to replace 4 with 1.
Yeah. We got to break up these big companies. Mm-hmm. And my response to that is no. How do you break up oligarchical stuff? I don't know who said it first, but somebody said that there is no monopoly in any civilization. There's never a monopoly without government collusion. Mm-hmm. Because if you truly have a free and open market, there are too many innovative ideas. There's too much creativity out here to keep another idea from coming to the fore.
Sure.
And so if we actually opened up the market for neighbor to neighbor transactions, there would be, let me tell you, hundreds of thousands of small scale farms, domestic culinary folks that would start selling to their neighbors, mm-hmm. to their friends and neighbors. And it would, and I don't know how big that is. I don't know, but I can tell you that much of the elite pricing of local foods mm-hmm. is not because it's inherently more expensive to make local foods. It's because the paperwork requirements, the licensing requirements to legally sell on a small scale are so price prejudicial. I mean, we have I co-own a small federal inspected slaughterhouse, for example. It costs us roughly $500, between $400 and $500 to do to a beef, to get a beef animal, dead and packages of T-bone steaks, okay, sure. to get it market ready. Mm-hmm. It takes us $500 to do what the big four do for about $70. Mm-hmm. And much of that is because we have to have the same paperwork, the same licensing, the same compliance, the same inspector offices, all of the things, the requirements of a big operation, and you just can't spread it across as many pounds or widgets, and so the system is very prejudicial against small scale operations, both philosophically and economically. And so the big companies who tend to control the Republicans, they don't want the competition, mm-hmm. and they're going to scream, people are going to get bad food and all this. And the liberals, they don't want a free market because they've never wanted free markets, right. and they don't trust the Ralph Naderites. Mm-hmm. The Ralph Naderites can't trust you to make a. They say, well, we can't trust people to make a decision. We can't trust people to make any decisions. Right. Health, food, investment, anything.
Can't trust them to make a sandwich.
Right. And so the one side, the conservative side, typically, which owns the Republicans, is trying to protect their market, their industry, and the liberals are trying to protect the consumer from what they think is consumer stupidity. Yeah. And so it doesn't get done. But if we had a food emancipation proclamation to unshackle our food system and to free up small-scale entrepreneurs to access their neighbors, I don't know how big it is, but the local price would drop. Mm-hmm. The access would go through the roof. I mean, how many people say, man, I wish I could get, something better, but I don't know where it is. It's not very available. Suddenly it would be available all over the place.
Right.
and that would chip away. I think pretty dramatically. It would chip away at the stranglehold of the concentrated, centralized food system, which showed its fragility in 2020.
Oh yeah.
We have this efficient food system, and suddenly there was nothing on the shelves.
And you had the governor of Michigan saying that you can't buy seeds.
Right.
Madness.
Right. And we had a massive control of our. We had a massive breakdown of our food supply. I mean, does anybody think it's so crazy? It's like a rhetorical question. Does anybody really think that if in the spring of 2020, instead of having, 3,000 mega processing facilities, funnels, if you will, that funnel all of our meat and vegetables and everything, into the American home and industry, if instead of having 3,000 mega processing facilities, if instead we had 300,000 small-scale neighborhood abattoirs, canneries, processing facilities, would we have had as big a hiccup?
Right. Of course not.
Of course not.
That's redundancy. Everyone knows you built that into the system if you want to be resilient.
Of course. And so when you democratize and you broaden that base, that market base, you build in all sorts of protections for safety, for security, for stability in that marketplace. It's a multi-legged stool instead of a two-legged stool. That's the idea.
Okay, so Emancipation Proclamation number 1, Abraham Lincoln just wrote it down. They sent it out over the telegraph, and voila. Is that all you need for your version for food? Is it enough to just get to Daddy Trump and to say, it's going to be one sentence, all you have to do is sign it? Is that enough?
Yes. I'm not an attorney, and I don't know what all the legalities are, but if you look at his executive orders and some of the things that he's done, surely freeing up the food system from the bondage of Tyson is no bigger than some of the other things that he's done. And you know what? Yeah, James, I can't imagine something that sounds more Trumpian. I mean, doesn't it sound?
Right.
Can't you imagine him getting up here today? We're going to free our food system. I mean, wouldn't that be something that would just resonate with everybody? And you're going to be able to get food from your neighbors. It's going to be a lot cheaper, and your rural neighbors are going to earn money because they can sell into the community. And we're going to reverse the rural to urban investment drain. We're gonna move money from the urban to the rural sector, and these farmers are going to keep some of it, and we're going to unleash the rural entrepreneurial spirit on America's foodscape. I mean, there's just so many great little sound bites.
Yeah.
I really believe that if I could get 30 minutes with Trump to pitch this, I think he'd be all over it.
I think so too. There's another piece here too, and I want to talk about the whole tariffs thing because this it's all brought to bear on the same sort of issue.
Yeah.
There's this concern that Americans don't want to work in the sweatshops. They don't want to do the sort of manual labor jobs. They want to outsource all that stuff to Vietnam. And they might complain about globalization, and they might complain about cheap goods from Amazon, but at the end of the day, they'd rather have that and complain about it than go do the backbreaking work, hunch over the sewing machine, gut it out at the mill every day. And that's kind of the end of that conversation. But if you open up and revitalize this whole sort of decentralized agricultural sector, that gives people all kinds of stuff to do that's, challenging work, but rewarding work and physical work that has an emotional component and a spiritual component that we can talk about and a community component.
Yes.
And people don't need to be sitting in the sweatshops all day, whether they're in Vietnam or whether they're in Oklahoma.
Oh, so well said. I mean, one of the reasons that stuff has moved out of our country from food to manufacturing, making towels and T-shirts. It's not just because of the cheap labor. It's because we have regulatorily and inordinately increased our labor costs so high that we can't compete anymore. And we have Americans love to work. I mean, we're a working society. I mean, Yankee ingenuity, right? I mean, that's in our DNA. We're workers.
Restless people.
Yeah.
Even if you stick a phone in their hand all day, they're still trying to figure out what to do with the phone.
We are workers. As opposed to say Europe.
Sure.
I mean, we're not looking for time off.
Yeah.
We are workers. But when you hamstring us with workman's comp, with minimum wage, with and trust, I'm not interested in sweatshops. I'm not interested in abusing people. But one of the problems is, for example, let's take our farm for example. People say, well, good night. If you're not buying chemical fertilizer, if you're not buying pesticides, and you don't have a vet bill because your animals are healthy and all this, why can't you sell stuff way cheaper than it is in a marketplace? Well, the reason is because we substitute equipment intensity, energy intensity, capital intensity, which is of course banks and money, borrowed money, and pharmaceutical intensity. We substitute all that with people.
Right.
And the IRS doesn't like you to have people.
Oh no.
Because you can go out and abuse your tractor and depreciate it quickly and buy a new one and expense it off. You can expense off equipment. You can expense off fertilizer. You can expense off all of these inputs, but you can't expense off people. The government will come in and, well, you've got to have this. And again, I'm not interested. We pay our people very well. Our team we have a fantastic team. We're all in this, but this is why industry is being pushed so far to go to robots. They want to do everything to get away from people.
Yeah.
Because you anybody that thinks I'm blowing smoke, you own your own business and go through a workman's comp audit one time. Go through an OSHA audit one time, and you will find out very quickly that that the requirements and the regulations around people make every business want to have as few of them as possible.
Yeah.
We believe on our farm that we have a much better land management program, a much better creation stewardship program, and a much better just ecology program if we have more people. More what we call eyes to acre ratio. All right, increase the eyes to acre. When Michael Pollan was writing Omnivore's Dilemma, he talked about if all those concentrated animal feeding operations at Smithfield and Tyson, and if they had glass walls, it would fundamentally change the way Americans ate because people would see it. But no, what do? They have them in buildings. They put up razor wire around, and you got to look. If you got to walk through sheep dip and put on a hazardous material suit to go visit your food, you might not want to eat it. So our farm has an open door policy, 24/7, 365. Anyone can come at any time from anywhere in the world to see anything, anywhere, anytime, unannounced. That's our commitment to transparency, and by substituting management for all of these chemical, energy, pharmaceutical crutches or inputs, we actually don't save money.
Yeah.
But we do fundamentally change the kind of jobs people have. For example, on our farm, we process a lot of chickens, but we have a policy that we don't process more than about 3 or 4 hours in a day, only a couple of days a week. And the other time you're out feeding chickens, you're going, and just the very idea that somebody, kills things or peels onions every day, or it makes it into drudgery. But if you have small entrepreneurial diversified operations,
right,
where you have different animals and different things and different plants, then you have a workforce that becomes much more. Today I'm doing cows. Tomorrow I'm moving chickens. Next day I'm butchering things. And the next day I'm peeling potatoes. You move around. Now you don't have carpal tunnel syndrome. You've got interest. You've got broad eclectic understanding. And so there are all sorts of major societal and social things that happen when you broaden the base of what I'm talking about, rather than just, the average chicken processing outfit in Virginia, I know I've heard them say the thousands of people they have on those chicken lines, every single procedure can be taught in 20 minutes. Now, you think from a human standpoint, a human affirmation standpoint, if you spent your life doing something that you could learn in 20 minutes, how human affirming is that?
Yeah.
And then as soon as you go to compost rather than chemical fertilizers, for example, we do, hundreds and hundreds of tons of compost. Now suddenly, instead of spending $7 or $8 billion a year fighting fires around the U.S. that are created because the environmental wackos have shut down the chainsaws and we can't cut a dead tree, let's take those trees, chip them, and let's take all that biomass and convert it into compost. Now we don't have to buy a single pound of chemical fertilizer, and we have created thousands and thousands of jobs where dad and mom can come home and little Jenny asks, well, what did you do today, daddy? And he says, oh man, I weeded the forest. I took down all that dead and junk biomass, made it so it could decompose better so that Farmer John can grow hay and grass and food and potatoes. And it feeds the earthworms so that we build soil and you inherit a world that has richer soil and more earthworms than I did.
And no student loan debt.
And all of those people are affirmed in a sacred, noble task.
Okay, so you said the S word, sacred. We got about 7 minutes left. So I want to make sure, tell us just like, how does the Christian piece fit in for you? And I know there are some people who are like, well, not everyone's Christian. It's like, well, you might learn something. So what do you got?
Yeah. So for me, the number one thing is ultimately it's not mine. You don't have to be a Christian to realize it was here before we came. I mean, the courthouse says I own it, but I don't really own it.
Yeah.
I don't own the water. I don't own the trees. I don't own. Okay?
Not taking it with you.
Yeah, not taking it with me. And so in my Christian theology, that owner is God. And so if it's his stuff, then I ultimately am a steward. I don't own it. I'm a caretaker of something that's his. And I would suggest that if I was God and I made it, and I look down and goodness, there's a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico. All the shrimp and the crabs I put there, they're all dead. They're gone. It won't even grow anything. And I look around, whoa, I've got 3-legged salamanders. I made those with 4. And I've got infertile frogs, that can't get around because of, poisoning. And oh my, eagle eggs, the beautiful eagle, they won't hatch because of DDT. I'd say somebody kind of messed up my stuff.
Yeah.
That is not the return on investment I was looking for. And so that dramatically shapes how we handle our ecology. It shapes what we grow, because then our patrons, we don't call them customers. We call them our patron saints. Okay? Our patrons that support us, we're now responsible for them. We don't want them to get foodborne bacterial, diarrhea. We don't want them to be sick. We want them to flourish and be vibrant and have great immune systems and not toxicity. And so that frames it from the earthworm to the plate. It frames how we steward and care for what God has entrusted to us to care for.
Yeah. All right. I mean, it just seems like so many people are on this page in America.
Yes.
and they don't really know what to do about it or how they can best intervene. So like what is your generic advice? You're an American, you see what's going on, you know that millions of people agree with you. You know that time is in some sense running short.
Sure.
You see what kind of world we're handing off to our children. It's a poorer world, it's a sicker world, it's a more unstable world. What do you do?
Three things. Number one, get in your kitchen. We cannot have an authentic food system and be this profoundly abdicating our visceral knowledge and participation in our food system. Get single ingredient stuff. It's never been easier to cook from scratch. We got Instapots, we've got crock pots, we've got time bake, we've got slicers, dicers, blenders, juicers. It's never been easier to take single ingredient stuff. Yes, a butternut squash. Yes, a beet. Okay, not frozen pizza and the processed stuff. So get in your kitchen and get excited about participating in domestic culinary arts with your techno-glitzy kitchen gadgets.
Right. This isn't anti-tech stuff. It's like, what are you supplementing and what are you trying to replace?
That's right. It's never been easier. That's number one. Number two, do something yourself. Touch the mystery and majesty of life. I don't care whether it's mung bean sprouts in a quart jar on the windowsill, a 12-inch by 12-inch vermicomposting bin under your kitchen sink. Touch something touch life something, and just appreciate the miracle of life, the biology. And number three, put attention, invest in your provenance. The biggest lie is that I don't have to change. If those people would do the right thing, and if those people would do the right thing, and if those people, all those jerks over there, well, we live in a time where we want to defund things. Well, it's time to defund the stuff that's bad and let's fund the stuff that's good. And so put some attention on finding your provenance, whether it's your farmer's market, your local farmer, your a local roadside stand, a website, with a good farm that doesn't use chemicals, whatever that is. Shameless plug, we ship nationwide. Glad to help people. But the fact is, get in your kitchen, touch the mystery and majesty of life viscerally somehow, and then invest in sleuthing your provenance. Those are the three things that anybody can do.
All right, and you guys are Polyface Farms, right?
Yes.
Is there a little story behind the name?
Yeah, the farm of many faces. Poly being many, the Latin prefix for many. So we're a many-faced farms, many enterprises, many faces, many people. The many facets. It's the many-faced farm.
Great, Joel Salatin. Let's emancipate the food. Let's emancipate the farmers. Let's go.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us. That's all the time we got. Till next time around, I'm James Poulos. This is Zero Hour, and may God have mercy on us all.